we are at Principle 6 now, which is Synergize. So we have gone through the first 5 principles. Today there will be quite a bit of a review of those principles, but I also just want to make sure we review what we're trying to do with this book. This book has been, somebody asked me this morning, what do you think of the 7 habits? And I probably didn't give a very enthusiastic answer because I've heard about it, I've read it, I've been around it since I was in high school. So a lot of that is it's just kind of been there. But when I think of this book after a couple of minutes after I gave that answer, the principles or the habits are very, very common sense. They're when you think win-win. Like if Michael Scott is saying that in The Office, it's pretty much common sense. But the idea of that is I've seen that played out in my life. I can go back to situations where we had to make hard decisions in the family, and I'm like, oh, seek first to understand, then to be understood. I can go back to decisions that has been made at Cedarville, and I could see be proactive or think win-win. So there's a lot of things with this book that are really, really good and stuff that you'll see throughout different areas of your life. So the 3 things I want to remind us of this morning is effective people do the right things for the right reasons. You don't have to be told to do things, and it's not always advantageous for you to stop and listen and seek to understand before you're understood, but it's the right thing to do. And it might not always get the attaboy or the attagirl or good job or whatever you're looking for or the pay raise, but it's the right thing to do. It's the idea of integrity. Effective people seek to live by the 1% rule. You get 1% better every day. You will never be a perfect person that thinks win-win. You'll think win-win today, and then tomorrow you'll think lose-lose. And then the beauty of that is you have another day. You have another opportunity. So you have that 1% rule. And habits are developed. Habits require commitment and hard work. You never start a habit and just go like, it's going to be easy to be here at 7 o'clock in the morning. It requires hard work and discipline. And that's one of the reasons why we do these things at 7 a.m. is that it is a habit. It is something that if you're going to invest in stuff, my dad used to always tell me, you get out of things what you put into them. And the idea of showing up early, being there, that investment will have hopefully not only a lifelong effect, but an eternal effect. And that's the goal of it. So Synergize. That's what we're going to talk about today. And the big idea is the principle of creative cooperation. So that's the definition that the book gives. When you hear the word synergize, they're like, okay, it's the principle of creative cooperation. So when we talk about synergizing with groups, we're talking about cooperation. We're talking about that creative cooperation. So how does finance work with Renova? How does SGA work with, CAB? How does class council work with maybe the RAs? The idea of that creative collaboration. So we're going to go through the why, the what, and the how of synergy today, and then we'll definitely have some time for questions. So first of all, why synergize? In the book, in page 308, Covey says this: the exercise of all the other habits prepares us for the habit of synergy. So the idea of being proactive, think with the end in mind, put first things first. The whole idea, all those things flow into this principle. So now you have gone from being dependent on yourself or independent with yourself, being able to stand on your own 2 feet, stand with who God created you to be interdependent with people. And now you're getting to the place where you're like, man, now we can work together. And that's the goal. When I think of synergy, I think of usually a basketball team. I've seen several basketball teams growing up. Growing up in Indiana, you saw a lot. I was really privileged to be on a team that had great synergy, that from the freshmen that were on the team all the way to us as seniors, it was very encouraging to see we didn't care who played. We just wanted to win, and we wanted to be a good team. I've been around teams, and I've been around teams even here in the local area, and my daughter's been on basketball teams where you could tell that there's no synergy on the team, that when the player gets taken out of the game and somebody subs in for her, she's mad. She's looking at her parents going, like, why'd they take me out? I'm not kidding. But the idea that in our society today, the principle of synergy, the idea that I'm going to give up what maybe is rightfully mine for the betterment of the team is unheard of, and it's almost uncommon. So like even when I saw this the other day at one of Audrey's games, one of her fellow teammates passed to another girl. It wasn't Audrey, I could say that. Passed to another girl, and the girl lost the ball out of bounds. The girl looks up at her dad and goes, "What do I do when they lose the ball?" And I'm like, well, that's definitely not the definition of synergy. That's usually the idea that it was all about, that was a great pass, and it was a great pass. But how many times do all of us dribble the ball out of bounds at times in life? So synergy is that idea of that creative cooperation, but also why do we synergize? Well, it values the differences in others. Think about that. When we work together, we value the differences in others. So for me, I've got certain skills, I've got certain abilities, I also know I have certain weaknesses, and so for me, I need to surround myself with people that help, make my strengths look good and actually make my weaknesses go away because they take care of those things. It looks for the differences in others. It finds the best option. So think about that basketball story. If you're the person that's always looking for your points and your glory, you don't want to pass the ball. You're looking to shoot the ball. Like sometimes I need Audrey to shoot more. She always likes to pass. She's like, I love to pass. I'm like, well, you need a little bit more synergy in your game because you like to pass and you do great, but I think if you shoot, you're going to open the passes up more. So the whole idea of it's like you look for the best option. And then synergy also builds a strong team or family. So Danielle and I were meeting with somebody last night, and one of the things that Danielle said was, we're not in competition. Couples are not in competition, but it feels that way. Man, this is my way. I know how to raise a 17-year-old boy. No, I don't. But I like to think I know what I'm doing with my sons, and then Danielle's got her own thinking. It's the idea, how do we come together and find the best option? It is the best thing for a team, and it is the best thing for a family. So that's why we do it. We don't just do it because somebody tells us like synergy. It's time to have synergy together. No, we do it because it actually does create the best option. So imagine here at Cedarville, what would happen if Campus Experience tried to synergize more with Residence Life or with Discipleship Ministries or with SAA or with athletics? Now you might say, well, they're not synergizing with us. Well, let's take the first step. Now, what would happen? We could find the best option and we can make things better for people. But sometimes we as a group think, well, I've got to handle everything because my job is X. So I have to handle X. Well, at times, X should be handled by you and you should manage it, but you need to work with other people. So that's really important on that. I don't know what's going on with that, Caleb, but that's okay. What does synergy require? Well, synergy requires the other 5 habits. So let's review a little bit. So being proactive. Synergy requires you to be convictional, open-minded, and civil. So respond, don't react. That's the idea of being proactive. What would happen in our politics, now I'm getting a little bit toe-stepping, but what would happen if we were convictional? We stood on what we believe. Well, that's not happening. What if we were open-minded and willing to listen to other people? That's definitely not happening. And then what happens if we were civil? That's the idea of being proactive. Synergy requires that you're open-minded, but first and foremost, you're convictional. You know what you believe. You're not going to come into a situation and go, oh, you don't believe in Jesus, so I'm just not going to talk about Jesus right now, and I'm not going to believe what I believe because I don't want to offend you. You've got to have some conviction. Because nobody ever woke up in the morning and said, I'm going to steal money from my organization. Or nobody woke up in the morning and goes, I'm going to have an affair today. These are all things that are a slippery slope, and people gave up convictions, and their integrity was on the line, and they made big, big mistakes. So be open-minded, convictional, and civil. So that's being proactive. That's number 1, being proactive. The next is beginning with the end in mind. Your principles focus your priorities. The idea of what is big for you, what are the big rocks for you, they'll focus what goes on your schedule. So I wrote this down. Synergy requires you to realize and understand that you are not the creator, but the created. So if you begin with that in mind, it's like you walk into a room and you realize that God created you just like God created Ben, and God created Molly, and God created Rachel, and God created Anna. Whatever it is, if you walk into a room that way, it's a lot easier not to look at people and go, they're an idiot. But when you walk in the room and go, I demand this and I'm the right one and you're the wrong one, that's the problem. That's where synergy goes out the window. Synergy also requires that you know who and why, your who and your why, but you're open to the what and the how. So let me say that again before I not stumble all over it. You've got to know, if you're going to begin with the end in mind, you got to know your who and your why so that you can negotiate on your what and your how. Your who and your why should never change. You're a child of the Most High God. Your why, you are called to be on this earth to bring glory to God. Your what, how you bring that about in your different careers might change. It's called methodology. The message doesn't change, but the method might. So that's the idea with the begin with the end in mind. The next one is put first things first. We talked about keeping the urgent more important. No, the important more is greater than the urgent. Synergy requires discipline and the ability to get things done so you can be sure to keep the important, your Bible time, your friendships, more important than the urgent. I think that's really, really important. Synergy requires you to have a filter. Think about that. You need to be able to think like, this is not the right thing for me right now. And I've had to do that. There are times that there have been good things that I was doing that I'm like, I got to step away from because it's affecting my family. It's affecting my time with my family, or it's affecting my time at church. I could get real busy at school, and then I can almost get so overwhelmed here that I forget that my first responsibility is the family, second is the church. And that's important to remember. So putting first things first. Then we get to think win-win. Synergy requires you to fight for the best idea in the plan. Here's where synergy starts to get really, really practical. It's the best idea, it's the plan. It's not your idea and plan. And that's difficult because you come invested in your plan. That's why a lot of times my mentors have always told me, don't come to a meeting with a closed fist, come with an open hand. General Reno he told me all the time, is like, Brian, sometimes I sit in big meetings, even when he was a 3-star general at the Pentagon, with his hands in his lap, open, reminding himself that every idea should be an open idea, and it's the best idea that wins. And then the last one we talked about last month, just a few weeks ago, seek first to understand, then to be understood. That's consideration and courage. Synergy requires the skill of empathetic and holistic listening. So the only way you can really figure out what Paris's idea might be is to shut up and listen. And sometimes shutting up and listen doesn't mean that you're just sitting there, but you're actually asking good questions. You're seeking to understand, but then you're also providing your input. So we've seen the why and we've seen the how, but now actually the what. Now how do we synergize? The book gives these 7 things. Number 1, identify the problem or opportunity. So when you try to synergize on something, don't just get with Renova and go, hey guys, let's synergize today. Everybody's going to look around the room and go, what the heck are y'all talking about? It's the idea that you get with them and go, okay, we have an opportunity with this. We can do a drink maybe for an alt night. We used to do this. This is I'm not selling anything. I'm just giving an idea. But we could do a drink for an alt night. There's the opportunity. All right, what is the opportunity? How do we define that? Well, what are we trying to do with this? So Cab goes, hey, we're trying to get more promotion. Renova's like, well, we better have good sales because if it's just about the promotion, it's hard on the baristas. It's not fun. Then you get into, you got to listen to their way. So maybe Cab shuts up and says, okay, Renova, how do you make that work? And then Cab's got to step up and go, hey, this is how we would like to see it work. We would like to see that every time that somebody comes to the counter, we used to do this for the Hunger Games and they ordered a District 12. They would come there as like, oh, you want the District 12? Don't forget that next week is the alt night. It starts at this time. We're showing the Hunger Games. Love to see you there. The idea that, first of all, Cab listened to Renova to go like, okay, you want me to do crushed Oreos on top of a dirty chai. That's not an easy thing to do, but I think we can do that if you guys come in and help us crush the Oreos. So we're like, okay. So we did that. And then they have to make sure that the other team understands your way. Then you brainstorm. Then that's the idea of going, okay, I've heard you, you've heard me. What's the best thing that can come out of this? You imagine if we did that. Just imagine if Campus Experience did that with Residence Life. And I think there's a lot of synergy with RAs and with the deans and with the RDs. But the idea if we sat down and said, okay, what do you need from the Gridiron Classic? Okay, what do we want from the Gridiron Classic? All right, what are some ideas that we can make this even better than what it currently is? And then from there, you find the highway or the best solution, and you go with that. So when I look at Synergy, I want to ask myself a couple questions. Number one, how have I practiced it this week? How have I practiced it, or have I practiced it this week? And I asked myself the question this morning, how have I practiced it this week? Well, when you're raising teenagers, you have to communicate as a couple. And so last night, Danielle and I were home alone, because Keegan had taken Ethan and Audrey was at practice. So we drove around a little bit, and we were just talking about, okay, what are we going to do when Audrey gets her license and now we have 3 drivers and only 2 cars? So we're trying to think, I'm thinking of ideas going, well, they can just walk. Danielle's like, well, we could start saving money every month. And I'm like, I don't like that idea. But we could start saving money every month for us to buy them a car. And so you start listening to that. And then the beauty of that whole thing, when that conversation was over, after about an hour of just driving around, waiting for Audrey to get done with practice, we were able to look at each other and go, wow, I feel closer, and I feel connected, and now we've actually helped figure out a solution instead of just going, well, I got my way, they can buy their own car, and Danielle's got her way. Hey, well, we need to provide for our kids. I still think they should buy their own car, but I think we came to a little bit of a solution. But the idea of that is synergy happens there. Synergy happens with everything that we do. And I think that's really, really important. So how have I practiced it this week? The other 2 questions, and then I'm going to shut up. Who are the people that you work with that you don't always agree with? That's where you really practice synergy. So who are those people? I was going to call somebody out just to be funny, but that would have been bad. But who are those people that you work with and you're like, man, why can't we get on the same page? If you want to practice synergy, work with somebody like that. And really practice, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And then what projects do you have this week that you could seek input on? What projects do you have? What projects do you have that you can go, man, I really need some help on this? And you'll see this next year. We're getting into a new assessment called the Working Genius. And the Working Genius is going to provide you with how you like to work. So you're going to be able to hey, I'm really not good at that, but you are. And when you do that for people, it brings joy to them. So Leslie's a great getting things done to-do list person. I like to invent things. And Leslie comes in my room and goes, hey, my office, and she's like, hey, I need your inventing skills. And I'm like, okay. I feel like a kid in a candy shop. She asked me to do something that I love to do. That's the idea of synergy. And we live in a world where that's not practiced, celebrated, because we live in a world where it's all about the individual. And I think that's where we need to change so that we can be more, have more synergy. So looking at the whole thing, this is cooperative, creative cooperation is what you're looking for right now, getting this stuff done. So my question is, how are you going to synergize today? How are you going to do it? How are you going to work with other people today? How are you going to seek first to understand, put the first things first? All these different things. How are you going to do today? I promise you that synergy will make a huge difference. The next habit we talk about is sharpening the saw, and it's the whole idea of how you go in and you just knock off little edges on all these to get better. It's a circle. The idea is you never arrive. If you think, well, I'm arrived at synergy, no, then you need to go back and be more synergetic today. So look for ways that you can have creative cooperation.